The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
The aftermath of every social revolution brings about change. Cultural norms and landmarks shift as our minds and hearts expand beyond the familiar. To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose in the land of the living. Revive and restore the hope lost to the busyness of life. This is our time to dig again and rebuild from the storms of our past on a solid footing that holds. Welcome to The Foundation.
The Foundation.
Good.
The Foundation with Heart Grant is brought to you by Alive, Ancient Chinese Secrets, Bond for Bones, Burger King, Carrie's Fabric and Uniform Store, Ceslin Pediatrics, Commonwealth Bank, Epic Battery, Grand Bahama News, Popeyes, Print Masters, and Ron's Electric Motors.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company, The Foundation. It is an absolutely beautiful day. I say this, and you know that I don't know how the day looks just yet because we pre-recorded the entire thing. I'm excited to talk to you about these particular things, but I know that if we are in the land of the living, we should be giving praise. It is a beautiful day, no matter if it's storming outside. My God, we're here. I am grateful to have this conversation with you, grateful for the time and the opportunity. Gotta shout out my good, decent people over at AFS Insurance Agents and Brokers. They got everything laid. If you're in the market for, insurance, if you're looking for that, make sure you do that. They got everything laid out. If you get your taxis, your liveries, your jet skis, all of those particular things, you can get one of those things in terms of insurance taken care of by AFS Insurance. 3411 AFS 3411. AFS, they are located number 407 Blue Hill Road South. They can take very, very good care of you. Check them out. AFS Insurance Agents and Brokers. 9 to 5 on weekdays, 9 to 2 on Saturdays. Guys, make sure you go down there and check out Ancient Chinese Secret. Also grateful to Miss Yang for the opportunity to be able to speak about what she does. I am always grateful. Had an opportunity. I'm taking that lion's mane now. Y'all need to stop. That thing is crazy. Lion mane, ginseng, the beetroot, the whole thing like that. Listen to me. I feel mad slim. I need to stop, right? It's a beautiful thing, guys. Go down there to Ancient Chinese Secret, and actually Miss Yang, she can take very good care of you if you're in that kind of a space. And you're going to hear from her real soon as she comes on and talks to us about all the testimonies that she has that person's been able to heal themselves naturally. She's located on Shirley Street, just opposite Thompson Trading, right? Thompson Trading. She can be able to take care at Ancient Chinese Secrets. Guys, make sure you pick up the Guardian newspaper. All the information's in there. And I am grateful to be able to do that. Guy, and I know that you want to participate. I know that you want to be a part of the conversation. I know that you want to chime in. I know that you want to call in, but you're unable to do that. However, don't lose that train of thought. You can be able to hit me up, 827-0111, 827-0111. Now, don't fight me if I don't hit you back right away. But just put that thing there, and we can be able to dive into that as I get back just in a few days, just to be able to talk about these things. We're still on this conversation that we laid out, that we prepared to be able to move out there and release for this week. It's called Stay Sober Bahamas, right? And the sobriety that we're talking about, the sober nature that we're talking about is strength, opportunity, balance, empowerment, and revival, renewal. This is important for us to be able to realign ourselves and move in the direction that we should. We're seeing as things happen from a local standpoint, from an international standpoint, geopolitical and otherwise, there is a shift afoot. And we need to understand where we are. But we can only do that in sobriety. Talk to me. I'm not talking about your little beverage that you like to indulge in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the nature of us understanding and recognizing that we have really been conditioned in our society. And for us to be able to step into realignment and understanding that we must be able to capture our autonomy, capture our strength, we can only do that with sobriety. And I'm grateful to dive into this today. It's called An Independent Initiative, Realigning a Nation Disenchanted with Traditional Politics. I'm joined by some wonderful folks in the studio with me today. We've been trying to have this conversation for some time. I might as well tell you the truth. We've been trying our best to kind of get this together. I had an opportunity to be able to speak to organization's leadership on several occasions, and really been able to, you chat it up, you see people, yeah, man, we got to get together, right? And I've always meant it, but we've never been able to do it. I found that there's no better time to do this than now. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to the Organization for Responsible Governance, ORG, in the house with me today. Good afternoon, guys. How y'all doing today?
Hello. We're great. Thank you so much for having us.
It's wonderful to see y'all here. It's wonderful for y'all. They're adorned with all their paraphernalia, being able to talk. They come here mad professional. I'm excited about it, to talk about this particular thing, and I want to be able to introduce you to them. They are none other than Vanessa Bethel. She's sitting here with us, and Stefan Evans. Say good afternoon. Introduce yourselves. Let them know who you are.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stefan Evans, and I am the Assistant Director at the Organization for Responsible Governance.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Bethel, and I am currently a project assistant and administrative manager at ORG, but currently transitioning into a role of project officer.
Now, tell me a little bit about ORG. A lot of persons would have heard you, heard the organization speak and agitate on one thing or another, but maybe not necessarily pieced together its purpose and what is the vehicle for change that you intend for it to be. Talk to me about that.
Right. So in its simplest terms, the Organization for Responsible Governance is committed to promoting the principles of good governance across the sectors of the Bahamas while educating and engaging. Typically, the 8 principles of good governance, which include things like accountability, transparency, adherence to the rule of law, inclusion, consensus, and a few others. And we do research and run different initiatives that help to build those into existing systems. And really importantly, we engage with the public, with the people. We are in the business of public education and civic participation, which looks at helping people to understand that you could have the best laws on the books, the well-governed institutions in government, in the private sector, in civil society, but where people are not engaged in the process, we're not going to be successful. And so finding the balance between building strong institutions, laws and frameworks by which the country is governed, and making sure that people see themselves as a part of the process, that's the intersection that ORG exists at.
Tell me when was your inception? When was the inaugural voyage? Beyond the idea that says that this is a necessity for us to introduce in our society, but tell me when you kicked this off.
So ORG has a very interesting story. Before we were founded, which was in July of 2015, so we're at the 9-year mark now, there was a coalition for responsible taxation. And they came together to review the implementation of VAT and to make sure that private sector voices were incorporated in the conversation around how this new tax would be rolled out. And they were instrumental in providing additional research and information to the government on the responsible implementation of the tax. As with any law or process of legislation and policy development, not every recommendation was taken. But it was a great starting point to say that when people come together, regardless of if they're representing themselves as a member of any community or the business community or the nonprofit community, that our voices, they do matter. And when we organize ourselves in productive ways, it doesn't always have to be a fight of people versus government or this group versus that group, but it demonstrated what true cross-sector collaboration could look like. And then ultimately they recognize that that's not the only thing that is missing this cross-sector collaboration. This is a general gap that exists in the Bahamas. And so they founded the organization in 2015 as a foundation. Shortly after that, our executive director, Matt Aubrey, came on. And from then to now, we have been growing and building, and where we were very well known in the beginning for our advocacy around policies like freedom of information, which we were a part of getting that passed and enacted, and we still have some ways to go with that. But since then, we have impacted over 20 pieces of legislation. We've run citizen education programs around 10 islands, which we continue to do to this day. We have trained over 100 nonprofit organizations on an annual basis. So we've been out there, and we are in pursuit of helping folks to understand that governance reform is not a war zone. It's not combative. It's all about together that make the country work.
I want to ask you a few questions. I got so many questions now, right? I want to ask you a few questions about the inception of this organization and being able to push yourself forward to be able to get this thing done and recognized locally. Is the cross-section the person who started the taxation coalition, the coalition of taxation,
Right.
to be able to make a determination of what to do or to present concepts to the government for them to be able to move in one direction or the other? Was that a cross-section of business owners locally?
Yes, yes. So they were all local business owners.
Everybody was local. And from the synergy and the unity and the collaboration, you recognize that we can sustain this.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. What was the thought pattern? I'm sure they told you the stories if you weren't involved at the inception. What was the thought pattern that transitioned from this coalition for responsible governance into organization for responsible governance? How was this energy so palpable that you felt the necessity to kind of capture that, captivate that, and see if you could sustain that going forward? Talk to me about that.
So I think, and I was not there at the beginning. I've been around for about half of the organization's existence, so I'm familiar with the folks and the stories, and I'm very inspired by what happened. I think the recognition was that, so these folks who are, many of them remain on our board, and so we're able to engage with them, recognized what happens when people with common interests come together. Now, those common interests with regard to something like VAT's impact on the business communities is going to cater to a particular group of people. So there's this understanding that we're not capturing everyone across the board. This is one particular issue and its impact on one subsection of society. And I believe that we can sort of recreate this level of formal advocacy that looks at how do we gather credible and evidence-based information on how change can be created. If this could be replicated, but not just with the business community, but across the sectors with the people, that will create that landscape for inclusion and representation so that in any matter that is important to anyone, that we can see a similar impact where, our sources, we're being cited in the House of Assembly when these laws are being put forward, for example. And I think that the beauty in it all is that it's not easy to replicate because it's different based on where you're operating. So when we're approaching policies, for example, that impact nonprofits like the NPO Act of 2019, which is a very important piece of legislation that regulates that sector and all the work that nonprofits do, but it has had some unintended consequences on the way that we're able to function, and it's put some limitations on us. And in other ways, it's been very helpful in helping organizations to be seen as credible. So the thought process was that if we come together, we collect information, we empower ourselves, and we advocate for our rights and what we believe is the way forward, and we've done that, how do we make sure that other people have access to the same? And that's kind of why I highlighted where the work has gone. So I always say that we have a keen focus on Family Island engagement. Sometimes we have to catch up on Nassau, to be honest with you, because we spend so much time engaging with voices from Family Island communities. And we also spend a lot of time with nonprofits outside of training operations for nonprofits. We do a lot of work in helping to advocate for the sector so people understand that nonprofits might not exist to make money, but they do definitely impact the GDP and the economy, and they make a major impact when it comes to things like natural disasters and disaster risk management, humanitarian aid, support services for a wide array of folks. So the concept essentially was that we come together, we put our heads together, we put our perspectives together, and we're able to create change at many levels from Parliament right down into communities or in the business community in this instance. And I believe that the vision was that we want to be able to replicate this in every other space where people feel disenfranchised or concerned about what's being put forward.
You know, as I listen to you and you sort of lay out, the only thing that I'm imagining in my mind is that we've come to a conclusion that the change that we wish to see is not being enacted by the government or governance or mindset that exists in this particular space for one reason or another. And if we have identified our brothers and sisters in arms with a desire to be able to get to an objective, then we must use this energy, this force, this sort of kinetic push to be able to get to a position for growth and development. Now, it may not necessarily be profitable from a financial standpoint, but it'll be impactful from the overarching objective of what it is to be Bahamian, what it is to be a citizen.
Right.
This is an amazing thing. This is an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think at the end of the day, at the center of that work with folks, we're working to empower people. We're not necessarily saying what the answer is, but we're saying that you have a role, and we try to provide tools to help facilitate people a pathway, them finding a pathway to what they can do, because everybody's capacity is different, right?
Right.
So we all have to figure out that we do, and at different levels, right? So a lot of our work in the community works to empower individuals and groups, and we're not prescribing what they should care about or what the right answer is to a problem, but we want to let folks know that they have that role, that they have the right, they have the power to create that change, right? Mm-hmm. Earlier we talked about reacting, right? But it's like there's ways in which at the forefront you're engaging with what's going on, at whatever level, the national, global, community, all the way down, to the very micro level. We even a lot of our work when we do work with kids, we talk about those micro actions of what an active citizen can be. So that's the idea. We're working to inform folks so that they can get move towards action. We our tagline is get informed, get involved. And I think that's vital to get that sustainable movement to what we want to do. And I think, we talk about the Family Island work. That's because, we understand that there are certain people that may feel marginalized or disenfranchised, right? So how do we, integrate that into our work? Because those principles of good governance, sure, that works at the very highest levels, but that also works at our organizational level, at our individual level. Mm-hmm. Governance is more than just government, right? And so that's why we tackle the sectors that we do, from private sector, the citizens, the government, and civil society.
Wow.
And that is, I think, that empowerment and the encouragement that we provide to folks, letting them know you have a role to play. We'll help you figure it out. We'll help provide you with tools to get there, but we all can contribute to the sustainable development of our country.
I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sitting here with none other than ORG being able to talk to us now. When we get back, we're going to have a deeper conversation about their role and why I thought it was necessary to kind of bring them in. I wanted to have a conversation from neutrality. I don't want to talk about the FNM or the PLP. I want to talk about concepts of governance. And I really do want to talk about this sort of an idea of how we as citizens, I often say to us, and you often hear me say on this particular space, the FNM has a plan, the PLP has a plan. Do we, as a collective citizens, have a plan to chart our way towards the idea of growth and development that we envision? Let's dive deeper into it. Guys, this is The Foundation with Howard Grant. Let me take this quick commercial break and be right back after this.
The Foundation. We'll be back right after this.
The Foundation. The Foundation.
It's Whopper Wednesday every Wednesday at Burger King Nassau. Make your Wednesday sizzle and sink your teeth into a flame-grilled beef patty topped with tomatoes, fresh-cut lettuce, mayo, pickles, ketchup, and sliced onions, all on a toasted sesame seed bun with fries for only $5.95, including VAT. This Whopper Wednesday, grab a friend and head down to your favorite BK Nassau location for a flame-grilled Whopper made your way with crisp fries for only $5.95. Burger King Nassau, where taste is king.
Now let me see now. 326 EPIC. Hello? This Epic battery. This Miss Beulah from around the corner. I hear you're selling tires now on Wolf Road too.
Praise the Lord. It's about time. I live Fox Hill.
That ain't all. They open Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. On Sunday and holiday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
My brother Sam, he's a hacker, and he could go right there and get fixed up.
Call us at 326 EPIC. We ship also to the Family Island.
You try to rest, but roll with the best. For all your printing needs, there ain't no one better, no. For posters and banners, magazines and flyers. For window decals, greeting cards and newsletters. No job too big and there's no job too small. You name it, we can print it. Just give us a call. Let Print Masters bring your masterpiece to life.
Located in the Nassau Guardian Building, telephone 302-2361.
The Foundation.
The Foundation.
And we are back at 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company, The Foundation, live and in full effect on this beautiful, beautiful Wednesday. This is going to be Wednesday that we're playing this. I'm grateful to be in your company. This is a pre-recorded show. I know you guys want to be able to call in, text in, and contribute. Like I said, if you want to do that, please hit me up, 827-0111, 827-0111. Grateful for the opportunity. I'm sitting here with none other than ORG in the house with me, Organization for Responsible Governance. They gave us sort of the gamut, the idea of the inception, how this blossomed into what we've been able to see over the past almost decade now, 9 years or so. And they've really been able to take me through the idea and what the organization stands for, what we mean, what are our objectives, where do we want to go. We know that it's not necessarily we're going to be able to make no tremendous amount of money, but we know that we can be able to enact things. We've been doing all we can, but being able to put white paper ahead, legislation ahead, being able to forge that, training, educating. This is an exciting thing. I'm sitting in the studio with none other than being able to talk to us from ORG. Good afternoon again, guys. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Excited about it. It's been a wonderful conversation thus far.
I appreciate it. So I want to know this, though. I want to talk to you about this. I want to tell you about this idea that we have. We've been having this kind of a conversation now. I'm faith-based. I carry myself with conviction, and I really believe that our leadership, especially how we tie this concept and idea of honorable to them, that they should carry themselves with the same convictions and understanding their responsibilities, adhering to the Constitution, aligning themselves with the principles and the values that we stand for here in the country. Now, without being able to identify any individuals or issues, we have not necessarily seen that the way that we desire. No. We've seen our society being able to teeter in a different direction. We've seen sort of pronouncements that we should align ourselves with global views and ideas that exist from an external standpoint and then simultaneously, if you're saying that we should amplify something external, then that means that what we have internally diminishes. Talk to me from ORG standpoint, right? Beyond the education, I understand that you guys are always, you're saying it, and I want to be able to dive deeper into that you're in the family of islands. They've felt disenfranchised for a long time and coined the phrase Nassau centricity.
Yes.
As a result,
yes.
Because they feel disenfranchised, that they're not informed that even those entities that are responsible for being able to provide information, raw, cut, unadulterated information about what's happening from an economic standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from a health, from an immigration standpoint, that they don't have this sort of an information. Talk to me about, let's say this was a utopia. In a utopia, in a perfect world, how would governance look in the Bahamas?
So what I would see a point about some of the faith-based values, I think that's an actual important point. One of the beautiful things about the way that the Constitution is written, and even about faith in general, is that a lot of the values that are listed, a lot of the values that the Christian faith in particular here in the Bahamas talk about, in a literal sense, could be they could do a lot of really good and positive things if we saw those values reflected in the way that we live our lives, in the way that we are governed. And so we definitely, although we're not a faith-based organization, we encourage people to use their faith as tools and to be somewhat of a guiding light in their life, and to think about the way that their actions impact other people and make it mean something. And that is also something that could happen from the individual to the institutional level. Those principles of being empathetic, for example, and showing love for one another, all of those things, while they sound like mush, they're important. And they are reflected in a lot of the formal research and data that talks about good governance. When you look at what perfect is a tough word, but as close to as possible, landscape for governance in the Bahamas, those sorts of values will be reflected. So in order for you to have true representation and inclusion, which are both principles of good governance, there needs to be a sense of empathy and care and love for the people around you. And we've been doing a lot of, it's a little more difficult to study some of those dynamics, but we have actually been doing formal studies on values like trust. Public trust is one of the governance. And while it's not listed as a principle per se, it's almost preemptive. So in a society where there is trust, because there's collaboration, because there's listening, because there's empathy, because there's love, because there's care, the reality is that we create a better landscape for governance, because in its simplest terms, we're just talking about the way that the country is run. And ultimately, if it's for the people and by the people, then we will have mechanisms for the regular collection of feedback from the community. We will see the values and the needs of individuals, of islands, of communities, and of sectors reflected not only in the laws that are there, but on Parliament's actual agenda. We will see things like the National Development Plan come back to the forefront. And I can say that there is work being done on that. We're about to participate in a forum that will hopefully be a part of the revival of that initiative, because there's nothing wrong with political manifestos, for example, but they are very short term. And so they do need to feed into a wider plan.
You're not going to say that they're unrealistic. Let me say that. They're absolutely unrealistic and unable to do within the space of 5 years.
Right. And so that's telling, because our issues aren't 5-year issues.
No.
I always think about the fact that on a personal level, I have a 2-year-old daughter. I'm thinking
That's
about the
wild,
Bahamas.
Stefan.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the Bahamas that I want her to live in when she is 18, when she is 30, when she is 50, the values and what is she going to give to her children, right? And so all of that will only actualize if we create a system of governance in which there's trust and collaboration and public consultation and research and evidence that points us in the direction of relevant developments. But it has to be sustainable, it has to be long-term, and there has to be these ongoing mechanisms for exchange between the sectors. As Vanessa alluded to, we try not to give all the answers. We do have a policy priority listing that speaks to the principles of good governance. So we know we need things like freedom of information and the ombudsman and other anti-corruption policies, and we need policies that promote economic development and sustainable models for the development of the Family Islands. And we've explored some of what those models would look like. But ultimately speaking, the answer is not for someone really smart to come and tell you what you need. The answer is for everyone to work together, to pool their ideas and their talents, and for that to guide the way the country is run. And there are ways to get it right. We've been a bit conditioned in that there's this fight, which is why I always sort of address it right away, that it's not a war zone. We have to remove the mentality that this is a fight. You could have your political affiliations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately speaking, we have to be able to see beyond that.
This is a crazy conversation that we're having. You realize that? Because what I hear in here is idolatry.
Essentially.
Oh my God, I get deep. I just get deep quick,
No.
I just get deep quick.
I'm glad you said
what
that.
What I hear here is for me to pull you away from your conditioning, which is religion. You don't even realize that this is idolatry.
We call it hero culture.
That is crazy.
And it's what happens when you put a person or a thing on a pedestal and you expect that thing to
and so
fulfill
no
all
matter
of
what
the-
you do
right.
from an educational standpoint, trying to be able to open their eyes, this is a relentless path to Damascus. That the scales are still, I just get biblical. I try to pull
Go
back,
right
right? This is a path to Damascus, that we've been on this road more than 3 days, that we've been in this rhythm for 50 years plus. And we to an enlightenment that we need to be able to look at different aspects to get to this objective.
Right.
And if I try to tell you, hey, look at something different, he said, don't you dare.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why you have to, your preamble, as you started off the conversation, your preamble, this is not a war. This is not a war. This is not a war, right? Like this, if you got to give this sort of a consensus,
Yes.
There may be a mindset that you're trying to fight what I think in.
Yes, and Vanessa could definitely speak to this a bit because in our citizen engagement model, it's a teach, listen, and act model. So we realize we have to tackle those three areas. There's a lot of research and formalities that go into the model, but in its simplest sense, you have to be able to teach people so that they understand the concepts and the landscape and how the country is working and what some of the limitations are. Because some of the things that we're expecting aren't realistic based on where our governance structures are at. We can't move very quickly on something like, changing minimum wage or like some of the issues that we want to see change tomorrow need a lot of work to make sure that they're done right. In the listen part, that is critical. So we do a lot of community focus group surveys, interviews, things to collect feedback from a variety of people, and we try to keep that as diverse as possible. And it helps to build the trust that's needed for people to give you the space to educate them. Because sometimes, especially as nonprofits in the sector, we dive right into people need to know about conservation and about women's rights and about equality and about all of these different things. And we don't realize that we have to build trust and actually listen to where people are at. Because you don't want to come in with something that someone doesn't care about, doesn't agree with, or has some philosophical difference with. And just say, I'm here to teach you how to be better and things that you didn't know. And once you hear from me, your life's going to change and your country is going to, because that's not the case. It still has to be collaborative. And then the third part of the model is for people to actually take action. But it's all hinged on this concept that no man is an island. So it's not up to the prime minister or a political institution or an org, for example, to swoop in and to say, yes, we've done the research, we've talked to people, and we pride ourselves in having listened so much, especially since COVID, because that changed everything. But realistically speaking, if we can't get Andres to stand up and Exuma to stand up and Abaco to stand up and Bimini to stand up and Exuma and so on and so forth, ultimately we're going to have a lot of even long-term plans that don't achieve much because people aren't empowered to do anything.
I want to ask you this question, Vanessa. I want to talk to you more about this. Why do you think that there's a sense of this sort of detachment from the political structures in our country? Why do you think that there's sort of a distance and leaders will kind of give us this kind of position that says, well, it is what it is. And everyone seems to be able to kind of throw up their hands to the idea that there can possibly be change, or even to the idea that we could make effort towards ensuring that there's change. Why are persons disenchanted and detached from being able to apply themselves from a formal standpoint?
I think there's a number of factors that contribute to that. I won't get into like all of the sociology of it because I from an academic standpoint, that's where my studies were. But I think, first I'll say I think we're not unique in that in terms of like us as a country. We mentioned trust, and what we've found is that trust generally is at an all-time low, particularly in our region. And I think that's a factor, whether it's perception or reality-based. People don't feel like they can trust in institutions, and that goes across. I mean, we did our own listening and consultations around the country.
This ain't just politics, though.
No, that's what I was going to say.
This church.
This is about
we talked about churches too. Yeah,
absolutely. Our project looked at, of course, government and public services, but also organizations like us. Because we have to go in and earn trust.
Because people have been bitten by these things.
Exactly. Yes. And one of
especially in our region.
Absolutely.
And more specifically in our country.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's be decent, right?
Right, absolutely. And so, one of the things that what we found that came out is that, people are having a hard time trusting their neighbors, much less, institutions and things like that. So I think another thing that came out of that learning and from this part of our work, right? We may go in with certain ideas and expectations, but really we're there to hear, right? And that requires us building trust and building relationships. But another thing is that people said what would they need to trust is action, right? And so I think there's a lot of good things that may happen at different levels in those institutions and those communities, but it's harder to see those things, and it's easier to see the questionable things, right? Also, I think people are struggling generally, economically, all of these layers, and I think
It's heavy.
yeah, and it's hard.
It's holistic struggle.
It is, and that's why I use the word
Economic,
capacity a lot, because
mental,
how do we
spiritual.
absolutely? So how do we feel like we have any power to create change when you're like, how do I put food on the table, right? So those things play a role, right, in our ability to feel empowered to create change, right? But this is also part of why we advocate really strongly and we embody this in our practices around consultation. It's about calling people in and creating the avenues, right? So I think to answer your question, there's this level of like what needs to be done to call people in at the various levels that we have a responsibility to participate in those particular roles, whether it's nonprofits, private institutions, government, media and everybody, right? To call people in, create the avenues that make it easier for folks to engage, right? Because it's not easy for everybody too, right? But you're right, there is that side where people, it's easier to, kind of, they ain't gonna listen to me anyway, right? And
But we know this story though.
Right, but it's a much harder
Steph and I about to get
change.
preachy with you. We know the story.
Yeah, but
We know this.
Yeah.
When I was supposed to go to Nineveh, and the people in Nineveh are stubborn and hard-headed, and they don't listen. And they're not going to reform their mindset. Jesus, why are you wasting my time? I'm going in a different direction.
Right, and that's the thing is like, I mean, sometimes that can, I'll say from our perspective, can be daunting because some of the work we're doing is very long-term. It requires cultural change. It requires mindset shifts.
What do you have to do for you to keep yourself sane? I wrote this down. How do you sustain sanity? How do you sustain your sanity? Let me tell you why. I can structure this now. We got to take it. I know nobody asks you this. So I got to ask you this. No. You know why? Because this. Okay, so what I do driving me crazy. This is driving me crazy. I ingest information every single day. Paper after paper, I ingest it. I have to take it in. And my position is unique, where I'm not a journalist. I provide you content, and my content can't be duplicated or seem to mimic or mirror anybody else's content. And so I have to ingest it, I have to block everyone off, and then I have to assess it. I have to dissect it within myself, and then I have to deliver. I do this every single day. And relentlessly after we deliver, relentlessly after persons call into the show and we're providing, solutions or answers or even, sort of an idea that we see day after day the exact same course that governance is taking. That governance, despite the relentless suggestions stuffed into the box of governance, right? We see them taking the exact same course that happened yesterday. The exact same course. Even after they give us the mottos and the idea and the glitz and glamour of the possibility, if you vote for us, we see them take the exact same course of yesterday. And so for me, it's exhausting. But then I remember that I can be weary in well-doing. Stefan, come on, man. You're supposed to be right here with me. Preaching with me, man. You're supposed to be here.
I'm totally with you.
And because of that, so I want to ask you, what do you do to keep yourself refreshed? What do you do to keep yourself reminded that there is a path that I have to take to be able to follow this particular course? Let me take this break. When I get back, kind of chew on that. And when we get back, let's talk about these particular things. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here. We're having a very good conversation. We're getting down into people's business right now and talking about these things. We're here at the Foundation, sitting down with ORG, having great conversation with none other than Stefan Evans and Vanessa Bethel here from ORG. Matt, we're looking forward to seeing you come back, my brother, being able to do this again when we get back, hopefully, and to be able to dive into this. Guys, quick commercial break. We're going to be right back after this.
The Foundation will be back right after this.
The foundation.
Tired of banks forcing you to use technology to bank the way they want you to? Your convenience is important. So no matter what your banking needs, Commonwealth Bank's friendly staff are always available in branch for that personal one-on-one service. But when you choose technology, our online and mobile banking app offers you state-of-the-art functionality. The choice is yours. Commonwealth Bank. Bank the way you want.
Great news! Ron's Electric Motors' new location on Cowpen Road, right next to Island Luck, is open Saturdays and Sundays. So for those needing repairs on electric motors, generators, welding machines, water pumps, battery chargers, electric lifts, transformers, and power tools, Ron's Cowpen Road location can have you up and running on weekends. Don't forget, you can still visit Ron's Electric Motors on Wolf Road and Claridge Road, and now Ron's new location on Cowpen Road. Dial 356-0249 or 323-5267.
The Grand Bahama News is available every Tuesday in the Nassau Guardian. You can buy your local paper at Freeport convenience stores, Western Bakery, De Gregory's Fine Foods, and Bellevue Gifts. Now is the time to reach your Grand Bahama market with affordable packages, including print and digital. Call GB News sales representative Kavandre at 822-6717 or message him on WhatsApp for ad rates. Classified ads are now available every Tuesday as well. Keep up with everything Grand Bahamian every Tuesday in the Nassau Guardian.
Carrie's Fabric and Uniform Store wants to get you ready for back to school.
They have ready-made uniforms and uniform fabrics for almost every school in the Bahamas.
At Carrie's, find skirts, blouses, shirts, jumpers, boy shorts and long pants, neckties,
uniform skirts custom made.
Check out our selection of embroidered cotton shirts.
That's Carrie's Fabric and Uniform Store on Mackey Street.
Call us at 393-0758 or 817-0758.
The Foundation.
The foundation.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company, The Foundation, live and in full effect. We are here jamming, man. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to sit down today and have sort of a heart-to-heart with persons who are in the trench. Right? Is that a rough terminology? Right? Yeah, man. We're in the trenches today, right? we are in the trenches, right? We are the proverbial foot soldiers today. And I want to be able to know about some things. I asked a question just before the break. I'm sitting here with none other than Stefan Evans and Vanessa Bethel, being able to talk to us all the way from ORG as we dive deeper into this Stay Sober Bahamas and being able to have a conversation about neutrality outside of the political conditioning and the constructs that exist from an external standpoint, understanding our autonomy, our strength, our position, our independence, and our responsibility for being able to move forward. That's what this conversation is about. And so when we left before, I hit them with a coffee shop conversation. What's a coffee shop? Okay, let me tell you. If you remember when it was on the trail, on the campaign trail, right? And they asked her in the coffee shop, "How do you fix your hair in the morning?" And she started to cry, right? That's the question I asked you. The question that I asked you is, how do you sustain yourself? Yeah. How do you maintain this sort of a mindset? How do you reject the idea of being able to step into governance or step into a strategic position if people are giving you suggestions and lending you suggestions? Girl, you might as well leave this thing. Yeah, Stefan, you might as well leave this thing because, we can take care of you. We can get paid. You all don't get paid. Talk to me about it.
Right. And I think, I'll try to be as brief as possible with this. But, as we said, this work is in many ways a long-term, it has sort of your short-term strategic goals and things that we can achieve, right? And every project, as project managers. But a lot of it is this long-term change, right? And sometimes it feels like you're banging your head against the wall, but there's always something that you can hold on to. Whether sometimes in the grand scheme of things, you can say it's small, but it's not insignificant. Whether it's when last week we were closing out a project with a pitch challenge with high schoolers and entry-level college students, right? Watching them explore ideas about how they could positively contribute to a particular issue in this country, watching them brainstorm, watching them cultivate skills to present that information, really thinking about how to achieve it, right? That's something for those individuals. youth of our country, right? That's something you can hold on to. That's great. Watching them conquer their nerves, right?
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, that may feel small, but that is something. And that is contributing to the whole, right? Change happens. We were once, just like, and you can look at the broader historical narrative, right? Women once couldn't vote, right? That's we could cite those references. Things happen, right? Sometimes they're harder to see, harder to feel, because I think I'm a feeling-based person, right? Like, that's important. But those things happen all the time in what we do, right? Yeah. And that is powerful because those are our younger generations, right? There's also larger scale stuff that we do, right? The connections that we make, that in the moment you may not get the exact result that you want, but you're building towards something. And it's important to hold on to those things. And I'll just add a dash of this with my personal story. And for me, I'm answering this from my place of what sustains me. I'm a kid that grew up in poverty. I grew up with no running water, 2x4 plywood shack on an island. I luckily didn't go hungry because my daddy was old, born in 90, grew up growing vegetables and fishing, right? So I was lucky in certain ways, but how could I have ever imagined to have ended up where I am today?
Vanessa, you give me way too much information. I got too much questions now. Anyway, go ahead.
No, but that has always, I hold on to that because that tells me that there is possibility and there is always hope, no matter how daunting things are. And that's why when those things, like what happens in those consultations that we have, those conversations that we have with people, and watching people get passionate and care. We had a focus group in Abaco late last year, and people around the table, they already started, like, this wasn't the goal of the focus group, but they already started brainstorming of what actions they could take after. Yeah. So that was wonderful and beautiful to watch, right? And things have manifested from that conversation, right? And so those are the things that you have to hold on to when you're doing work that ultimately is about big change.
This feels like discipleship.
Yeah.
It feels like discipleship. It feels like you give up everything to know that there is an overarching objective for better.
Yes.
And even if I don't see that better, I contributed to that with every step.
Absolutely.
Isn't that crazy? I think a lot of us, I think the conditioning that we have, oh my God, I enjoy this conversation so much, you have no idea, right? I think the conditioning that we have in our society, we've been conditioned to accept, to look for, to anticipate instant gratification, right? And as this sort of a mindset that exists even in our well-doing, we expect to be instantly rewarded, whether that's financial, whether that's with the accolades, whether that's with significant, taps on the back and people being able to identify us. We're looking for instant gratification. But this is sort of a thankless job that you have. But you have to know within yourself, like you said, grab that little small thing, these little small interactions, and just a glimmer of hope to be able to see that is it really push you forward. Absolutely. Do you know that that's just how I feel about this thing? That I don't believe anything that I say can change anything. I don't believe that anything that I can say can change anything. But I do believe in the power of branding. They don't know this. People don't know this, right? The people don't know this. They don't know this about me. I do believe in the power of repetition. Yeah. I do fact that if I can relentlessly do something with consistency, with passion, with determination, that it can be able to lend change. You don't even know that you've seen things different because of what I'm saying. Yeah. You don't even know. Yeah. But I know. Yeah. And I can hear it and I can see it. All right. And that's what we look for. We look for, when we're looking at other persons, let's say, for instance, we're looking for a leadership standpoint for them to be able to come on a very strong position and say something that resonates with your audience, say something that resonates with what you've said, and you say, oh my God, I think we struck a nerve. I think we did something, right? Yeah. Is that what you guys, you, Stefan, is that something that you see or you move towards?
Absolutely. I think repetition is very important, and going in with that mentality that this is for the long term is critical. It's key, because sometimes we just need to hear something long enough to be able to make a connection when we see even the slightest movement. And if we didn't have that person or that group or whoever it was that told us like this is what it's going to look like and this is what you can look out for over and over again, or just enough time for us to get it, then we miss it when things actually begin to happen. For me, just the experience of being with people has been so enlightening. I definitely there's a measure of purpose that I feel like this is what I was called to do. Like I'm walking in my purpose, and that doesn't necessarily make it easier on the day to day, but it helps me to stay grounded. But I'll say this, I think you captured it beautifully. So I echo all of Vanessa's sentiments. The one thing that I would add, in addition to the on-the-job micro moments of like, this is a thing, like this kid is learning something, or this person is thinking a little bit differently, or even just willing to talk to me. Community outreach professionally for about a little over a decade now. And coming to org, and I'm always very transparent about this, was scary. Because I've done the poster child community work. I spent a lot of time with the Bahamas National Trust. I founded a volunteer network. So those are, save the environment, feed the kids, go to the old folks home, go to the hospitals, do all of this stuff. And I had never been questioned. My integrity had never been challenged. I had never been asked, well, who sent you, or what is this about? And then I come to org, and of course, because we rub shoulders with the political space, all of a sudden the questions begin to come in. And so that was scary for me, because I'm like, I've been walking in my purpose and doing my thing, and it's already been hard, even when people trust what I'm doing. And so now there's a little bit of a barrier because of our relationship with governance that makes this a bit more of a challenge.
Relationship or proximity?
I think it's both.
Miss Heavy, what you say?
Yeah. So because politics could be divisive when used in the wrong way, and that's what we're used to seeing, it feels like anyone that talks about it has to pick a side, has to say that one thing is right and one thing is wrong.
I get that every single day.
Yeah, and that's not the case. That's not what I get up to convince you that whoever gets closest to what I'm saying is the solution. That's not the point. The point is that there's this collective space called the Bahamas that we exist in, and we have to work together to make it work, regardless of what color or brand we represent. And to your point, these brands can be important, and what they stand for are absolutely important to our development. But what I can say is, even in some of the discomfort that people have had, the off-the-job things that are exhausting. We go to an island. I'm not a drinker. I have to go to the bar and sit with them for a little bit, and I'm like trying to keep up and not doing really good. I remember a particular time. My family's from South Andros and Eleuthera, so I spent a lot of time there growing up, and still now. And I'm playing golf off a dock next to a bar with boats, like in Mangrove Key, with people that I had just met. Because I had been working with their kids, and they thought that what I was doing was great. And I spent 3 years regularly visiting Mangrove Key specifically. Shout out to Mangrove Key. Love you all so much. And it's been a while.
Great time in Mangrove Key.
Yeah.
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
Foundation.
The foundation.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company, the foundation, still here, having great, I'm truly enjoying this, guys. If you didn't have an opportunity to be able to tune in, you want to go back, GuardianTalkRadio.com, GuardianTalkRadio.com. You can be able to find that thing later on this evening, or you can listen to the broadcast this evening, the rebroadcast as we do this. We're still having a good conversation with ORG. We're talking about being able to stay sober, Bahamas. Initiative realigning a nation disenchanted with traditional politics. And this is only being able to do this. We're talking with ORG that gave us great base and concept. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. Now we've been talking with none other than Vanessa Bethel and Stefan Evans, being able to tell us a great deal about their stuff. Vanessa, I want to let you know I have a tremendous amount of questions for you, right? But what island? Where did you go? Okay, so we'll talk about that some other time, right? But I want to talk about this. You guys are very passionate about this. I feel like, Stefan, I've been seeing you for years. I think we've passed, and I see your name in the book, and I've seen you, and I've listened to you for years, being able to agitate. And, it's almost like you're synonymous with this responsible governance. You're synonymous with ORG. There's an expectation. If I don't see Matt, I see you. And that's a wonderful thing. So we talked about integrity. We talked about sort of your convictions, what propel you. We talked about how do you sustain your mental faculties and keep yourself strong. Now that we know that you're sound, that the organization is sound, that the organization is anchored, and it has the elements of introspection and being able to dissect as to whether or not we're moving in a particular direction to keep ourselves on course. Tell me about the course. Tell me about the vision, the overarching vision that's devoid of any political organization, that has to do with, like you said, governance, civil society, the private sector, these particular elements that move together to see the country move forward. Talk to me about the overarching objectives of what ORG seeks to kind of enact in our society.
Right. So we have always worked with we call it a strategic framework, generally speaking, because the sectors don't change. Every so often, the overall goals within a given strategic plan period might change. Those 4 areas are sort of where we do our work. So we do government and public policy development. We do civil society capacity building. We do work with the private sector, and then citizen engagement. Those are driven by 4 goals, and I've spent a lot of time with this, so I could almost just say it by heart. But essentially, our goal with government is to drive meaningful engagement between the government and the other sectors to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of their operations. So everything from policy to the way the public service is ran and driven. With the private sector, what we're looking to do is to see sort of enhanced productivity, and that the private sector really, we believe that they should be at the forefront of driving local and national economic development. So doing research and studies that help to build economic development and empower private sector voices in the greater landscape of governance. In civil society, we want nonprofits to be effective and well-run. The nonprofit sector, which is the same synonymous with civil society, and it does include registered nonprofit organizations, foundations, religious institutions, political organizations, labor movements, even junkanoo groups to an extent. The way that these institutions are run play a major role in where we go as a country and providing additional services to people. But a lot of folks start their organizations out of passion, and so we're trying to help with the process of building civil society. So just like us, with a formal strategic plan and structure, with trained staff.
You know I can ask you a question, man. You laugh, but I can ask. You said something that's pivotal. Right. And churches start like this also.
Yes.
Jesus sent me to do this.
Right,
hey.
right.
But God didn't tell you that you don't know how to read and count? Right? No, I just want to be decent. I get
what you're saying. Decent,
no,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
There is an approach to doing these things. And if you have the talent, you need to be able to fortify yourself with the capable people who are talented in other areas to ensure that you can move your business forward, your company forward, your organization forward.
So in the same way that an executive director or someone who's a project manager might be, or a public speaker, for example, might be really great at inspiring a community, that doesn't mean that you're an accountant. And because the nonprofit sector is small, a lot of folks are fully volunteer-based. There's a growing number of folks that work professionally like we do in the sector as a career. And that's one of our goals for this to become a viable career path for Bahamians who want to work for nonprofits and be able to pay their bills and feed their families. Getting somewhere, we're not quite there as an entire sector yet, but there are spaces that exist. It's the same with faith-based institutions. So, and as an avid church person, I don't shy away from talking about it. Even though org may not be faith-based, the reality is if your pastor is great at inspiring people, at teaching and preaching, singing, whatever it is, that does not automatically mean that they may be good with admin stuff, for example. And so this is where we also incorporate churches, and we're going to be studying both traditional nonprofits and religious institutions in an upcoming project.
What about those organizations that seek to forge over the years that will be at the base of our conversations? We know that there is formality.
Yes.
We know that there is a quote-unquote well-oiled machine as it relates to the traditional political organizations in our country with the FNM and the POP. They have gone through testing, fire, trial, tribulation, ups, downs, and their years of commitment has, they still exist, okay? But there are organizations that come and they come and they go.
Yeah.
They come and they go. There's no consistency. There is this scrutiny, like we talked about at the beginning, when they're introduced. Who sent you? Are you a part of the establishment? Are you part of these particular organizations? Do you want to be able to sway us to move in one direction or another? So talk to me about that. Is ORG open, or have they extended their arms to the idea of organizations such as we just had a conversation most recently with Lincoln Bain, with the COI. We're seeking to have a conversation with the inception of how the DNA got started with Granville McCartney. We're hoping to have that kind of a conversation.
Great.
So talk to me about whether or not ORG is open to the concept of being able to extend these same elements, principles, opportunities to those organizations.
So we've had political organizations participate in our training opportunities, but we are very much open to doing work around the governance of political institutions. One, because they're a viable part of civil society, and two, because ultimately one or a combination of them will determine where the country goes for a given period of time, and that's very important. And while we are not in the business of probing into any particular operations, the standards still exist. We are not, I don't think we've completed and released this study, but we did do a study on the constitutions of political parties, because understanding the governance framework and being able to make recommendations to them is also as important as all of the other institutions that we work with. I would say the one caveat whenever we do work with political institutions, and I want to make this very clear, our internal policy is that anything we do is extended across the board to all parties, independent candidates, so on and so forth. So we're not going to have an opportunity that is limited to one particular party, for example, because they're in the time. And that can be sort of tricky. Bringing those groups together is not always easy. We have forums where we bring them together to talk about some of our topics. And the relationship is not as contentious as it may seem from the media perspective, for example. We have great relationships with a lot of folks across political divides. And ultimately, we want to make sure that if governance requires all of us to operate at a certain standard, it is all the more important that political institutions are there. We're not currently working on any projects that are specifically for political organizations, but if anybody's listening, we are definitely open to extending opportunities that continue on into the fall. We have a monthly nonprofit organization training that touches on many of the same things that political organizations need to run efficiently and effectively, transparently, with accountability, looking at financial sustainability and reporting, fundraising, so on and so forth, that are open to them. But we are quite open to future opportunities to make sure that we are promoting principles of good governance with political groups, specifically once everyone in the space, even if it's one independent candidate, has the opportunity to be involved.
As we talk like this, I just wanted to be able to know, because I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about the fact that we have independent candidates that are out here, and a lot of persons. Like at the beginning of the week, we started this conversation off with Kareem Hanchel. We started off with Addie McIntosh in a particular capacity, with as a servant leader for the Bahamas Constitution Party, and being able to do those things, right? But I just want to know, where's your strength? Because there is passion, there is a void, there is a desire, there is a need for the introduction of not necessarily new minds, but hopefully their passion tethered to convictions. So when you be able to step into governments, you don't leave your conviction behind, that you come into this particular space with strength. And we also want to be able to see them articulate and kind of give a vision of what they want to be able to do. Talk to me about how ORG could help formulate that and help them to be able to structure it accordingly in preparation after you've done all this questioning, after you've already gotten the consensus of the community, both locally, after you've done all these things. You can tell it. You can tell me. Doctor, I want you to know. Tell me, Vanessa, if I come to you as an independent candidate right now, right? and I have an idea for my constituency, and I don't know how to articulate it. I don't know how to structure it. I don't know how can you help me? Not necessarily get an advantage over the politics of the day or the establishment, but how can you help me in being able to talk about my passion in terms of bringing my community up?
Sure. I mean, I think anything that we would do is always going to be rooted in imparting the principles of good governance. So if they're formulating language, I would always want to connect them to, like, is what you're saying reflective? Are you embodying these things? Also, I think we, in many ways, are a facilitator. We may not do everything, but in our work, we build connections, we build networks. So in that way, we can make linkages, right? So I may not be able to, or be there to specifically help them figure out how to write their speech or figure out how to articulate it. I can give them guidance of, like, is what you're doing rooted in these principles, and why those principles are achieve the thing that you've identified in your community as important. I could also share tools that we've created that are important in how to achieve your goals, right? And then, of course, wanting to make those connections and linkages, because one of the things that we do, and this is very, very related to our work in civil society, is we also want to make connections of, like, who's doing what, where are the gaps, who can you partner with? Right. Strategic partnerships are vital, right? Yeah. So we're not duplicating efforts, right? But we also could identify the gaps, right? How do we leverage what's happening, what's not happening, to be most effective, right? So those are things that we are really working to do across all of our areas. But I think particularly, Stefan mentioned that we have an upcoming project looking at nonprofits and faith-based organizations and mapping, like, who's doing what, where, because that's going to provide us for both strengthening the sector from internally, but also, like, ultimately there's going to be, we're aiming to produce a database so people know where they can go for support and who's doing what, right?
Woo! This is heavy.
Right?
You go into the church to make a database? You're going to...
Yeah, I mean...
Forget.
What kind of pushback you can get in this?
Coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's all... That's the thing.
It's going
to take a while, and it's a long-term project, and it's not going to achieve everything we want in this first iteration, right? Like, that's the thing that we have to build foundations.
How
and then
did
keep
you
building on them?
Did you introduce this concept yet? Has there been pushback from persons indicating that... because in our society, and I'm going to get, well, you should be familiar with this. You're all over, right? Let me get into people business for 2 seconds. When you identify the fact that I can identify your numbers, your people, now I can equate how much money you're making. And one of the things that churches, undocumented, unregulated, so forth and so on, that they fear is you being able to watch their money.
I think everybody
have you received that? Have you?
Yeah.
You got that?
Everyone. So, and rightfully so. So, helping people, though, to understand the value of data, and we're going to get to this point eventually as we continue with the development of laws that govern the different sectors. People talk a lot about freedom of information laws that create a landscape for transparency are going to come along with private sector, with churches,
I got a question
with nonprofits.
I got a question for you with the FOIA, right? The Freedom of Information Act and so forth and so on. I want to talk to you about that. But go ahead, because I got to...
Yeah, but ultimately speaking, typically we will give people the option to skip over what they're not comfortable with answering. And most normally it's around, like, some of the specific finances. We find that more developed organizations are a bit more comfortable, including churches, with disclosing that sort of basic information. And of course, we're never going to ask anyone to disclose, like, any specific financial details, but having an idea of the range of budget tells us how much money is going into making these organizations work, what they're contributing to the economy in different spaces, and what the deficit is, so we can help to identify opportunities to help them build their own capacity. We have done this in the past, and we've collected information from hundreds of organizations. Our best estimate of the amount of nonprofits that exist is somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200. That includes churches, which is the largest category of registered nonprofit organizations, nonprofits as well. And so people, I wouldn't say that there's been pushback, but because we give folks the option typically to skip over certain things, they'll just skip it and answer the other questions.
If it's not a crucial thing, they can skip it. If you don't
They
make
don't
it a
think it's
necessity.
important, but it is important.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
and that's
is.
part of like the trainings we do because we talk about things about like strategic fundraising and things like that. So there's benefits, right?
Yeah.
But we also know that's gonna like some things is gonna
Yeah.
take time, right? But on the other side of that too, we've been in various workshops too where this has come up inherently where there's obvious value in having an idea of who's doing what, and so people can collaborate and not repeat efforts. But also it will allow us to identify what's not being addressed. Where are the gaps?
I like it.
And I wanted to quickly say to the point on the candidates, I think something was really key with the strategic partnerships. If independent candidates, other nonprofits, whoever they are, were able to better utilize existing community resources, could you imagine how strong some of these platforms would be? Because everyone, including the big political groups that are more well-funded, they create their own thing. They're going to build their own resource center. They're going to build their own community playground or whatever the case may be. And there may be places in the community or offer their own services or try to find the money to pay people to do particular things when that funding could be diverted to an organization, for example, that's already doing the work. Now, some folks like us typically don't accept funding from political organizations.
You don't have a chief in an
but-
Indian issue. He wants to be the chief and no one wants to be the Indian.
Right.
That's what we have in our society.
But if people were able to work together, especially for independent candidates, if you could identify folks in the community that are doing things.
I want to talk about this.
You may not ask them to affiliate as a part of your group, but you can highlight the work that they're doing and talk about ways that you can partner and talk about what their concerns are and sit with people. So at the end of the day, you could be realistic. I may not have the funding to transform Engliston, for example, or South Andres or wherever it is, but I'm going to work with the people that are here to make sure that they can get funding and they can
I like
see
it.
their capacity built. And that's how you strengthen it. This is what we do in the sector with org. There are 5 of us. So if we're operating on 10 islands, and shout out to all of our volunteers and supporters, we have to do that through working with people that are already on these places to maximize when we do get the funding to actually travel and to go and to run these forums in the community. Funding, we do it virtually. Someone is on the ground volunteering to help us get people organized.
I like
It's
this.
it's how you maximize your reach.
I like this. When we get back, I want to be able to talk to you about something. When we get back, I need to know about campaign finance reform. I need to know about the ombudsman. I need to know about the Freedom of Information Act. I need to know about the ease of doing business. I need to know about these particular concepts that we've seen. Some of those things, there has been a pronouncement indicating that there is a philosophical difference between one traditional organization to another in terms of the approach of how things are done. I need to know about these things. I need to know what ORG is pushing and whether or not any of these independents really have a chance being able to move forward. Guys, let me take this quick commercial break and be right back after this.
The Foundation will be back right after this.
The foundation. The foundation.
Start your day off with a mouth-watering deal. Available only at Wendy's. Introducing our new weekday breakfast deal that gives you a choice between 3 delicious items for just $3. You heard right. Monday through Thursday mornings, you get a choice between our Bakery Bliss Croissant, Breakfast Baconator, or a 3-piece pancake meal. Each only $3. Stop by your nearest Wendy's today. Better mornings always start at Wendy's.
It's time to upgrade the way you enjoy at-home entertainment. Alive Fiber is here. Enjoy all your favorite channels and streaming apps, all at lightning-fast internet speeds with affordable bundles, and it's only a click away. Visit www.alivefiber.com to sign up now. Stay connected, live your life. It's good to be alive.
Now let me see now. 326 EPIC. Hello. This Epic Eckert Battery. This Miss Beulah from round the corner. I hear you're selling tires now on Wolf Road too.
Praise the Lord. It's about time. I live Fox Hill and Fire Trail. It's too far.
That ain't all. They open Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. On Sunday and holiday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
My brother Sam, he's a hacker, and he could go right there and get fixed up.
Call us at 326 EPIC. We ship also to the Family Island.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
The Foundation.
The Foundation.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company. The Foundation here, live in full effect. Had great conversation, continues to do with the same. We're still talking about being able to stay sober, Bahamas, and preparing yourself to being able to step outside of the rhythm of outside of your proverbial idolatry to a system that doesn't serve us or hasn't served us to our true potential for a long time. I think that we've maintained. I think that we survived, but this kind of a thriving that we envision, this idea of being able to step above and beyond into a space that we can realize who we are. We talked a little earlier about Maslow's hierarchy, his theory, right? And being able to move up that pyramid to self-actualization. So many persons are still in this kind of a space where at the very base, they need to be able to eat. They can't think beyond being able to get something to eat. And we're going to talk about that. We're sitting with ORG today, being able to talk about these things. And in the person of Stefan Evans and Vanessa Bethel, being able to talk to us about these things, having great conversation with you guys. I really appreciate it. When we left off, I needed to know about these things. Now, with clarity, because these things are a public document and they're already laid out. In the governing organization and the administration at the helm right now start to talk about there's a philosophical difference. Now, never giving any specificity to it, but there's a philosophical difference that differentiates one organization from another as it relates to the Freedom of Information Act. What is ORG's perspective? And what do you seek to educate about why the Freedom of Information Act is important, or is it important at all? Talk to me about it.
So freedom of information is one of our key policy priorities. It's near the top of the list of things that we seek to work on, and we're hoping that in the near future we can do some work with some regional organizations, because it's a problem, or solution, I should say, to a problem around in our region, and I mean around the world. Freedom of information is very important. I will say we've found that a lot more folks than one might assume when you talk about policy and legislation, they get the value of it. But one of the key perspectives from ORG's point of view is that it can be a mechanism to build trust, and the trust that is needed for all of the collaboration that we were talking about throughout the show. It's one of those tools that allows that to happen because it creates a formal space for the exchange of information that impacts the way that we might make decisions. We have this concept, Vanessa mentioned it earlier, in our citizen engagement portfolio that's called an active citizen, which in essence is anyone that's committed to being the best version of themselves and to playing their role in pushing their country forward, whatever that might look like in their communities. And what we have found is that citizens will make decisions, or can only make decisions, based on the level of information that they do have. So you can't make an informed decision without information. And so what laws like freedom...
I didn't expect you to say that, you know.
Yeah.
Citizens can only make a decision based upon the level of information
that they have, right.
Not their level of education?
Not necessarily. Education is definitely one of the influencing factors, but realistically speaking, if you don't have information on where particular things are at, I mean, even in terms of the school system and what opportunities are available and how students have been performing and why and what some of those deficits are, you can't make an informed decision on where to send your kids to school. There's always, you know, I'm a product of the public school system, and there's always this debate like, well, maybe I should send my kid to private school versus public school, or public school versus private school because we turned out fine. And we're having these, but they're particularly in terms of like the public system. And I'm not saying this is the first thing on the agenda for freedom of information, but if we did have access to records on things like that, it might change our perspective on where we send kids to school, which could definitely determine where they end up in the long run. In addition to that, when we did the study on public trust, for example, what we found was the perception of corruption was very high. So a lot of people said, I think that people in government and even in nonprofits and churches are very corrupt. And then we asked the question, how often has it happened to you? How often have you been asked to give a bribe, or how often have you found yourself in a situation like that? And it was significantly lower. So people's perception of corruption is that it's at an all-time high, that things are so bad. But when you ask them, how often has it happened to you? Those respondents were a lot lower. And it's because we don't have access to the information that will really tell us how these institutions are being run and how they're being governed. So even though we may not see it that way, there are a lot of things that are just playing out, a lot of narratives that are playing out that are not founded in information that exists but isn't available. And that is contributing to the erosion of trust.
Let's go right
in the
back to my
Bahamas.
my question about education.
Yeah.
It goes right back to my question about education, because as majority black community that we have, the way that we transferred our information prior to being able to access it via books, even our desire to be able to learn, or the fact that we were rejected or kept back from learning at a time.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that the information went around with stories,
Mhm.
and with every story, they kick it up a notch, right?
Yeah.
So it started off with simplicity and listen, someone get cut. By the time it get to the 15th person, the arm fell off.
Yeah,
Oh, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
this is what I'm seeing duplicated here.
Right.
That a lot of persons have a fear of going in church. They say these things locally, right? They say,
Yeah.
I ain't getting that church, man.
Right.
They got their own private plane. Where? In the Bahamas?
right.
In the Bahamas? They
Exactly.
who got a private plane around here? And they start calling names. Yeah, you know these people.
Right, right.
Stop it. Where did you get this information
Right.
from?
But you know what? I say information versus education, but in our model, it's sort of synonymous, not completely. So when we talk about public education, we are looking at formal education as a branch of it, but it also covers value and character-based education, which can come from like church and family upbringing. But it also covers things like information literacy. How do we actually engage with information? How do we tell what a credible source is? And that was a part of our study as well. And so people who may not have had a formal education, for example, or maybe they didn't go to college, can still be taught information literacy. So they can be taught, if you go on Facebook and you see something, understand, you could see the person and they could be doing a thing and that might still not be real. But we click share because it's sensational and it's eye-catching and it's full of drama. And we don't necessarily think of the implications of those actions. And so teaching people media and information literacy, even outside of whatever level of formal education they've had, is pretty important.
Yeah. And it's been integrated into a lot of what we do. I'm just thinking recently we had a project where we were working with students at the Leadership Academy, and we had a number of folks come in and give different presentations, but some of those presentations were definitely centered around media literacy and how do you identify it. And those things they're so important, especially, I mean, you mentioned like
We recognize that through the pandemic.
Oh,
yeah.
We recognize it through the pandemic.
Absolutely.
The-
And it's only getting more complicated with AI because now you can actually like create videos and it looks like the
people,
person
yeah.
saying the thing.
It sounds like
Right.
them
So
too,
it's everything is getting much more difficult. Again, it adds to like the daunting sort of
Right.
vibe, but we're integrating that
Yeah.
into our work, and that's vital because again we can't go back and solve issues around certain folks' formal education, but we can certainly work towards imparting skills needed.
Right.
I like that. So tell me about this now. So we started to talk about this. You tell me about the freedom of information, the importance, the education associated with it for being able to make an informed decision, and that you're truly an advocate to ensure that we have this. And one of the things that we've seen locally is that there are elements that you indicated that you've worked towards ensuring that we can be able to incorporate the type of freedom of information that we see now. There is sort of a social standpoint, and even from a media perspective, that says that this is devoid of the type of teeth that we're looking for to ensure that it can take a bite out of some of the inconsistencies that we've seen socially.
We have been very vocal about our stance on freedom of information. And it's one of the interesting nuances with the organization. So when it comes to our policy priority listing, what we do is that's one of the few spaces where we understand that laws have a place. It's a much more technical space, and we tap into expertise with folks that study laws and that look specifically at those sorts of things. But with FOIA, one of the major challenges that exists right now is the amount of funding that's being allocated to it. So based on the information that we have collected, we need about $1 million a year in order for us to really see the plans that have been put forward to allocate every year and every budget cycle, that the budget for FOIA as we call it, is increased so that the Freedom of Information Unit is able to hire their staff and function. And the model that we work closely with the Freedom of Information Unit. The model that they have in place can definitely be effective in that they're looking at 10 institutions to pilot to roll out the system with, because this is going to be a process. Historically, in basically every country that has implemented and the ones that we've looked at, it takes time. It takes time because some things have to be digitized, systems have to be put in place, and they're pretty expensive. People have to be trained. And the structure that we have, the Freedom of Information Unit, is not taking requests directly, but there will be Freedom of Information officers that are assigned to different public agencies. So those folks have to be trained. And some of these things have happened, but realistically speaking, divisions, what's more important is that the investment is made by government in bringing this to fruition so we can see some movement on some of the things that have stalled. Because it was passed and enacted in 2017, and so it's been quite some time, and work had been done on it even before that. And so we recognize the need for that as a particular priority, and we've been quite vocal about, across administrations, about the importance of giving that movement the strength that it needs so that people feel more empowered, so that we can build trust and that folks as individuals can make better decisions.
I like how you're taking your time with it. I like how the fact that you are not, like we talked about, I feel like ORG has done the introspection and said, okay, now we get instant gratification. We got to take our time and being able to get to this. I think you've identified the fact that we're dealing with a traditional mindset that people find success and victory with sort of the elements that ruled in yesteryear. And until it's going to take time for us to be able to change it. It's going to take time for us to be able to see a different type of leadership emerge within our political sector, within these government sectors, for them to understand that, okay, we've done this enough. It's time for us to be able to make another move. One of the things I want to ask you also is campaign finance reform. We talked about this. We talked about the freedom of information, but I want to know more specifically about campaign finance reform. This is how I envision it. Let me tell you this. And I ran for the DNA in 2012, right? When they initially came out with a sort of a concept and idea of how things should be done. And in running for the DNA in this particular time, it placed me in this kind of position where I realized I didn't have a chance. I just didn't have the money. I couldn't compete with the traditional concept of flooding the streets with T-shirts and being able to ensure that even if volunteers are not getting paid, they're willing to work with the established organization, especially after the rhythm of what's happened since 2002. We've gone from FNM to PLP to FNM to PLP, and people feel like, okay, now I'm at the crest, I'm at the tip of this thing. The other organizations coming in, if I'm in place, I can be able to get some things done. there are major fights to be fought out there. But I always thought to myself, if we could level the playing ground financially, candidates to be able to give substantively, it'll force candidates to be able to give me a vision for my community. Yeah, because you ain't got no money. You don't have, I could come up with $50,000 in my constituency.
Right.
Let's just say this is sort of the mark.
Right.
I could come up with $50,000. I could figure this out.
Right.
Right. But I can't come up with $350,000. I can't come up with $400,000. I can't come up with $1.5 million. Right. But I could come up with a mark that if we have these particular institutions and these elements in place, it'll give people a fighting chance and cause there to be introspection in the community for them to say, hey, listen, this one ain't making no sense because I ain't getting nothing from him no how. So why should we go with him? Let's go with this particular guy. Talk to me about campaign finance reform and how you guys see it.
Well, so we've done some preliminary work around it. It's been a while since then. But I'll say this. I think that what you're talking about is important. In the advent of governance that is responsive and inclusive and representative, is this discussion around the value that third parties and independent candidates bring to the table, and not being able to secure and properly utilize the resources. And there's a lot that goes into making that happen and how it should be used and applied. The reality is we're of the philosophy that the more perspectives and voices that we are able to empower and to include, the not only the better empowered folks that are putting themselves forward, which is a civic action. There's a complicated relationship with politics, but it is a civic action to put yourself forward to represent your community. And when these barriers exist, particularly financially, and folks feel like they don't have a fighting chance, we're missing out on key opportunities to gain additional perspectives that might not be steeped in legacy or definitely bring important things to the table. There's experience and perspectives and having seen the way that things play out, and the relationship with the existing systems might be helpful in terms of bringing in structured and sustainable reforms, but ensuring that the playing field is a little more level is important in building new perspectives and making folks feel empowered, and that there are multiple avenues to do that if you don't want to align yourself with what has been going on in the last few decades. So we have been doing some preliminary studies on it, and it's one of the things that's in our policy priority listing. I won't say that we have a definitive public position on the matter yet, but I will say that we've always been an advocate for level playing fields and for making sure that there is access to sustainable financing mechanisms beyond what has existed. And while it can be tricky, especially when we get into the spaces that look at where and how campaigns are funded based on a number of factors that get pretty deep and scary, I think that eventually we need to move into a space where we're a little more open and transparent what these opportunities are, and about ways that we can make sure that there is, if not equal, equitable access to opportunities. Right, because that's where I think the debate between what equality and what equitability sort of comes in. If we want to see diversified candidates, if we want to see more women, if we want to see more young people, if we want to see more independents and third parties actually be able to make a substantive difference, we can't be afraid to dive into how institutions are funded, what the opportunities are, how the funding is reported on, and where it's coming from. Because if we're not able to do that, and this problem kind of exists within the broader nonprofit sector as well, which is why I'm always happy to answer when people ask where we get our funding from and talk about the local and international foundations being our primary source of funding. But if we're not able to explore those things in a way that is equitable and gives folks access to the information that they need to plan their campaigns and to think about where the funding's going to come from, we are losing out on brilliant ideas.
And you'll also be hypocritical.
People. Yeah.
If I
we would.
can't see your information, if
Right.
you can't tell me about your information,
Right.
you can't stand here and agitate to ensure that other persons surely theirs. So you got to
Absolutely.
be able to lead by example.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is ORG is definitely doing. And I thought that this is important because there are a lot of minds out there. There are a lot of hearts, there are a lot of passions out there. I'm sure that you see it both locally when you're here in
Oh, yeah,
Nassau
yeah.
and in the family of islands that there are, this may sound corny and kind of a weird thing, and a lot of persons may not necessarily agree with it, but I truly believe that we have extremely talented people.
Absolutely.
These people are genius. And they don't believe it. They think that this is one of the things that we say, but I am truly blown away by when I meet these people on the streets, when they call me, when they talk to me about different concepts and ideas, when they share with me their dreams, their hopes, aspirations, when they say that they're disappointed and they can be able to articulate where the disappointment resides. I think that if we level the playing field, not necessarily equality, but that sort of equitability, that balance that gives
Right.
everyone an equal access
Yes.
to be able to get to an objective. So you can no longer say, well, I can't win because this boulder is in the way.
Right,
All right, so we mash this boulder down, and now it becomes a triathlon. Now it determines your commitment, your position, your enthusiasm, your endurance to get to the end and make that determination. Guys, we're sitting here with ORG having a very good conversation. I got to take this quick commercial break and be right back after this.
The Foundation. We'll be back right after this.
The foundation. The foundation.
Do you have uncontrollable debt? Are you ready to make that move to Fidelity for a stress-free future? These loans have a built-in savings plan that pays you unbeatable interest. Ask about our debt consolidation loans today. Call 356-7764.
Fidelity, we're good for you.
Bonneville Bones, established in 1970, is the leader in men's fashion in the Bahamas. We're conveniently located in the Mall at Marathon and the Harbor Bay Shopping Plaza, and fully stocked with everything you need for all occasions. Our Harbor Bay Live, with the black and white signage of Bonneville Boutique. Both locations are open from 10 to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Bonneville Bones and Bonneville Boutique, still the leader in men's fashion. Located in the Mall at Marathon and the Harbor Bay Shopping Plaza.
Looking for a supplement which can be used daily without side effects? Give Ginseng Royal Jelly and Panax Ginseng Extract a try. They contain high active proteins and vitamins. They can prevent cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases, significantly increase energy and stamina, restore libido, sharpen memory, balance endocrine system, and prevent cancer. Recognize the blue bottle as authenticity. For more information, call 557-1369. Ancient Chinese Secret.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
The Foundation.
The foundation.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant and your company, The Foundation, being able to talk the way that we're talking. We're still talking sobriety. Stay sober, Bahamas. This is, I'm enjoying this. I'm grateful for the opportunity. One of our guests actually started to call and talk about independence. And I came up with this sort of a concept and idea that talked about sobriety, that talked about us being able to stay steadfast and focused and being able to identify this conversation outside of the traditional concept of what governance and governments or politics is in the country. And so I wanted to be able to pull some people in, and I'm grateful that you guys took the opportunity. Stay Sober Bahamas is an independent initiative realigning a nation disenchanted with traditional politics. And I'm here with ORG as we wrap this up and being able to talk about this. I want you guys to be able to let me know where we are. This is your 9th year, stepping into your 10th year. As you do this, you could be able to say that you're a decade old. Stefan, you've been here for half the time. Vanessa, you've been here and being in the organization. Where do you see the organization in the next 5 years? I feel like a job interview right now, right? So where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? Where do you see the organization in 5 years? Where do you see the indent rather that you'd make in society to be able to shift a particular mindset? What would you like to see in those particular instances? Talk to me about that.
You want to go first? You go ahead. So my philosophy on where I would want to see Oregon in the next 5 years, beyond we're the citizen engagement team, so we're going to talk about the people likely. Not to preempt you, but what we're working on in terms of our citizen engagement strategy can be thought of. I mean, we're not done, but it's not like top secret. An ambassador program. What this ambassador program would look like is the true empowerment of Bahamian voices on Nassau. It's particularly to make sure that Family Islands are engaged, but it will involve local communities on New Providence, involving themselves in our work in the way that's meaningful to them. So it's not a prepackaged program that we are going to go and travel around, as is typically the case, because that's kind of how you have to write proposals to get funding in the nonprofit space. But our hope is that we're able to raise enough discretionary funding so that we can run this program. And what that will do is whenever we run our public education initiatives, let's say if we want to learn about how do Bahamians feel about the state of governance, if we want to learn about public trust, if we want to learn about representation or any particular matter that relates to governance, why people don't come to constituency meetings, why people don't communicate with their MP. Typically what happens is with org and generally with this type of work is folks that are responsive to consultative opportunities are people that already get it, already plugged in, or people that make a certain amount, they have a certain level of education. And that's just statistically speaking. You have to work a lot harder to engage those folks that are dealing with the bottom of the hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy. But we don't want to leave those voices out. And so what my hope is in the next 5 years is that through this ambassador type structure, that we have folks in strategic places in the communities that can help us encourage people to come forward. The idea is that being engaged in civic participation doesn't actually require us to stop our lives, but it does require us from time to time to add in a thing or two, going to a community meeting, keeping up with the news, thinking before we click share on a post. All of these things matter. We can only do that if we have a continuous back and forth dialogue with communities to understand those dynamics. So I would hope that within the period of the next 5 years that we have that worked out, that we have volunteers and family, across the islands. So when these opportunities go out, if we have a new educational campaign, a new public consultation campaign, that it's taken up in communities. Because we work really, really, really hard to make it happen. So it might sound trivial when we say we've been to 10 islands, but outside of even the logistics of Family Island travel and the expenses that are really high, getting people to trust us and to feel like we're all in this together.
Do people think you are the government? You don't work for the government. Right?
Sometimes. I got that a little more at the PNT than I do at org. But people do sometimes have the assumption that even though we're not government, that we have influence, like we can go and then tell them to do something and they
or
have
finances that you get the public purse.
We don't get
Nobody just give you all money?
No. So all of our funding comes from foundations and primarily from grants. And if you are a corporate that believes in active citizenship and citizen engagement,
call us.
And please, because that's going to be important in us being able to do this, because projects are going to be targeted around a particular issue. But this is our central operation.
Yeah, and we also take donations. I mean, that's a
I like
very much
this.
smaller,
But
we take donations.
Yeah. But we're just like any other nonprofit. We have to go out there and find funding and simultaneously run projects and listen to people. And we try to go the extra mile. So even though the project has check boxes, this many people, this many islands, we want to make that meaningful. So we often work in the day and then do additional community engagements in the evenings or on the weekends or whenever to make sure that people know we're not just coming because we want to fulfill our project. We want to, get to know people in their communities.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're transparent, right? The more, I think this connects to the vision, like strengthening that part of our work. Because then the more discretionary funding we have, the more we can be responsive to what we're hearing.
Right.
And then I'll just add I would love, in addition to all of our policy priorities and the engagement work, I'll be leading this civil society mapping project for the next 14 months, starting in September. And I think that's going to provide a very strong foundation for a lot of important work. And I would love to see future work on
In these last 2 minutes, because I like that, since you started to talk about the civil society, these last 2 minutes, I want to talk to you about that. What do you say to the independents? What do you say to that passionate young person who's 18 years old, who has been advocating, has been a prefect, has been the head of their class, has been pushing and advocating for things to happen? Now they're discarding wall and boulder as they step out into formal society that says, child, look here, don't even try. What do you say to them who want to be able to become an independent candidate? What does ORG say to those persons who have a desire to be able to see the country change? Talk to me about it.
So I always start by saying that every country has a starting point. So when we look to the US, to Canada, to the UK, to other developed nations around the world, we look and we think, well, they have these things in place that make it, more likely that someone can be successful. But everyone started somewhere.
250 years ago.
Right.
This is whole America.
Right. And we just broke the 50 barrier.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a little more difficult in some arenas, but it's a part of the process of getting to that level of prosperity. And I will say that although change might feel slow, that Bahamians prove every day that we can break that glass ceiling. It's going to take work. I always encourage mentorship. Find someone that has done something, even if you feel like it may not have been the most substantial thing in the world. Listen to different perspectives and arm yourself with as much knowledge as possible. And know that even if your contribution is to advance something, you may not get it to where you would have hoped for it to be because things take time. It is worth it to leave your footprint in the sand and to be a part of the process of getting from where we are, which might be very challenging in your arena, to where we want to be, where these voices are respected.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys so very kindly for being able to sit with me today. I truly enjoyed this. Honestly, I truly enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, I'm hoping that my listening audience enjoyed it too. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. You got to give me a call.
Hope you like us.
827-0111. Give me some numbers for ORG. Let persons know how they can be able to reach you.
Yeah, so our office line is 323-0043. We are very responsive to our info@orgbahamas.com. My FFON at Org Bahamas. Use the info. Vanessa's is Vanessa@orgbahamas. And for anything, we have a citizen engagement email. So if there are any educational programs that you're interested in, if you want to check out our work, you can visit our website at orgbahamas.com. And all of our contact information and emails are there.
And we're all over socials as well.
And you're all social. Just ORG or
Bahamas Foundation on everything. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the show today. I want to thank you so much for being able to tune in with us. We're going to continue this conversation, continue to be able to dive into it. Tomorrow's going to be Small Business Thursday. We're going to be able to see if we can do something a little different. I'm excited for it. Guys, thank you so very kindly for this. That's ORG